Girolamo Savonarola, a Dominican friar from Florence, emerged as a significant figure in the late 15th century. His fiery sermons and reformist zeal left an indelible mark on the society of Italy during a time of profound religious, political, and cultural upheaval. Girolamo Savonarola was born on September 21, 1452, in Ferrara, Italy. He entered the Dominican order in Bologna at the age of 23, where he dedicated himself to a life of religious study and asceticism. His early years were marked by a deep sense of piety and a fervent desire to reform the church, which he viewed as corrupt and morally decayed. Savonarola's rise to prominence began when he moved to Florence in 1482. Initially, he struggled to attract attention, but his passionate sermons, which emphasized moral reform and apocalyptic prophecies, eventually resonated with the Florentine populace. By the late 1480s, Savonarola had become a powerful figure in Florence, attracting a large following. Savonarola's influence in Florence reached its zenith during the 1490s. In 1494, the Medici family, who had long ruled Florence, were expelled from the city. Savonarola played a pivotal role in the establishment of a new republican government. His vision for Florence was not merely political but deeply spiritual. He aimed to transform the city into a New Jerusalem, a model of Christian virtue and piety. One of Savonarola's most significant impacts on Florence was his religious reforms. He called for a return to the original teachings of the Church and denounced the moral corruption he saw among the clergy and the laity. His sermons were filled with vivid descriptions of hellfire and divine punishment, which instilled both fear and reverence in his followers. Savonarola instituted strict measures to enforce moral behavior. He condemned activities such as gambling, ostentatious dress, and secular art and literature. His followers, known as the Piagnoni or Weepers, zealously enforced these measures. The most infamous of these acts was the bonfire of the vanities in 1497, where citizens were encouraged to burn objects associated with moral corruption, including books, artworks, and luxury items. Politically, Savonarola's influence was equally profound. He advocated for a republican government based on Christian principles, where the common good would prevail over personal interests. Under his guidance, Florence adopted a more democratic form of government, with a great council that allowed broader participation from the citizenry. However, Savonarola's political reforms were not without controversy. His theocratic vision and authoritarian methods alienated many, including the powerful families of Florence and the Pope. His denunciation of the papal court's corruption, particularly that of Pope Alexander VI, eventually led to his excommunication in 1497. Savonarola's conflict with the papacy was a significant aspect of his career. His criticism of the Pope and the Church's moral decay resonated with many who were disillusioned with the state of the Church. However, it also put him on a collision course with the Vatican. Pope Alexander VI, notorious for his own moral failings, viewed Savonarola as a dangerous agitator. In 1495, the Pope summoned Savonarola to Rome, but the friar refused to go. This defiance led to his excommunication in 1497. Despite this, Savonarola continued to preach and maintain his influence in Florence. The tension culminated in 1498 when Savonarola was arrested, tortured, and ultimately executed. On May 23, 1498, he was hanged, and his body burned in the Piazza della Signoria, the very place where he had conducted the bonfire of the vanities. His death marked the end of his direct influence, but not the end of his impact on Italy. Savonarola's influence extended beyond Florence and had significant implications for broader Italian society and the Church. Savonarola is often seen as a precursor to the Protestant Reformation. His calls for church reform and his denunciation of clerical corruption foreshadowed the critiques that Martin Luther and other reformers would later articulate. Although Savonarola remained a committed Catholic, his ideas contributed to the growing dissatisfaction with the Church that would eventually lead to the Reformation. Savonarola's impact on culture was substantial, particularly in the realm of art. The bonfire of the vanities symbolized his attempt to cleanse Florence of its secular and humanist influences. While this had a chilling effect on artistic expression during his rule, it also highlighted the tension between religious fervor and the burgeoning Renaissance humanism. This tension would continue to shape Italian culture in the centuries to come. Savonarola's emphasis on moral reform also had social implications. He encouraged charitable works and the redistribution of wealth to help the poor. His vision of a just and pious society influenced subsequent social and religious movements within Italy. Savonarola's legacy is complex and multifaceted. He remains a controversial figure, admired by some as a fervent reformer and condemned by others as a fanatical demagogue. Savonarola's ideas and actions influenced later religious movements, both within and outside the Catholic Church. His emphasis on personal piety, moral reform, and social justice resonated with later reformers and mystics. The Catholic Counter-Reformation, which sought to address some of the same issues Savonarola had identified, can also be seen as part of his legacy. In Florence, Savonarola's memory has been preserved in various ways. Statues, plaques, and artworks commemorate his life and death. His impact on the city's political and religious life remains a topic of study and debate among historians. In popular culture, he has been depicted in literature, film, and television, reflecting his enduring fascination. Savonarola's legacy is also marked by controversy. Some view him as a heroic figure who bravely stood against corruption and immorality, while others see him as an authoritarian zealot whose methods were as extreme as those he condemned. This duality reflects the broader struggle between reform and orthodoxy that characterized much of Italian history during this period. Girolamo Savonarola's impact on society in Italy was profound and far-reaching. His calls for religious and moral reform resonated in a time of great upheaval, influencing both his contemporaries and future generations. While his methods and ideas were often controversial, his legacy as a fervent reformer who sought to transform society according to his vision of Christian virtue remains significant. Savonarola's life and work continue to be a powerful reminder of the enduring struggle for moral and spiritual integrity in the face of corruption and decay.